Freeple of Mirth, yeah, Rod Freeman here with more exciting adventures. Going back in memory lane there, back in the old early 70s, hippie time, on the Hippy Trail with your host here, Freeman on the road, and it's April or so. I just spent a couple months in Morocco. That was chapter 3. Today I'm doing chapter 4, and that's called Algeria, Tunisia, Italy, and Greece. And this is chapter 4 of my online storybook here called One Way Ticket, about my adventures as a delegate for peace and love, flowers, and no Vietnam for me. On the road, one-way ticket, traveling out to Asia. Right now I'm in North Africa. And I just finished Morocco. I met a guy that just came from India, and that's where I'm going. I'm hitching to India. So I'm hitching along, and I go up, I think I actually took a bus, because buses were so inexpensive in Morocco, and Moroccan hitchhiking wasn't really all that good. So we got through Fez, and then I think I hitchhiked out of there and got across the border, and I'm in Algeria, another former French colony, now a North African nation since they got their independence after World War II. A lot of the colonial nations got their independence. And Algeria, I just sort of heard about it, you know, in geography class or something, and I didn't really know much about it at all, and all of a sudden I'm there. But I've got an education coming up, I'm telling you. I'm going to learn a few things, and unlearn a few things too in Algeria. Okay, so my first ride I get in Algeria is this really nice Mercedes Benz that pulls over, you know, and I'm like on the road. I got my French pack, you know, my old blue Malay pack, you know, full of my stuff, and that's all I got in the world, man, me and the pack. And I'm hitching, this Mercedes pulls over, and it's this guy, mustache guy, he's a kind of an Arabic dude, just Arabic is the language in Algeria, as well as Islam is the religion. And this guy was a doctor, and he'd been educated in the Soviet Union, and that's what Russia used to be back in the day. Okay, now it's the Russian Federation, I think it's called. But then it was the USSR. They were our adversaries of the United States. Being I was from the United States, our adversaries in the Cold War. Okay, so the Soviet Union had, you know, kind of courted these countries, and as well as the capitalist United States, and you know, the winners of the World War II, you know, had sort of we're still kind of colonizing the world, you know, and the free world, or the United States, that's what we called ourselves, had part of the world, and the Soviet Union kind of had the other part, and this is what the Cold War was kind of about, an economic kind of war, but it was also flared up as a hot war a lot of times too, like Vietnam, which was going on at the time too. The Vietnam War was going on while I was over there, and a lot of other little conflicts around the world. And so I had been brought up to think that the Soviet Union was our enemy. They were a bunch of commies over there, you know, and they've done all these terrible things, which they had, especially after the revolution back in the early 20s and stuff. Anyway, this guy had been educated as a doctor in the Soviet Union and then sent back to his home in Algeria, and they were doing these kind of wonderful things. And so I thought, wow, that was a pretty nice thing the Soviet Union, you know, did for this guy, because now he's a doctor, he's got a Mercedes in a relatively poor country, you know, so he's doing okay. Anyway, he gave me a pretty good ride to a place called Oran. Okay, now he dropped me off right at this university. It was a university, and there were a bunch of young people, you know, and it was on the main road. And I was hitchhiking for a while, but then some of the students actually came out and started talking to me. And it was getting late in the day, and they said, hey, you can stay in our dormitory and stuff. So anyway, I said, yeah, these people are really friendly and stuff, you know, and mostly guys. I think there was a couple girls too. They're kind of a secular Muslim where women are more visible, you know. In real traditional, strict Islam, women are not usually even out in public hardly, you know, and they're veiled, you know, and real modest and stuff. Anyway, I went to their dorm and hung out there, and we stayed up. You know, they got me food and stuff. And they said I could stay there as long as I wanted. They're really, really kind and generous. And they started talking about some political stuff that really blew my mind. And this is the first time I'd ever heard anything about the Palestinian people. Now, at the time, there was basically a war going on in the area that had become Israel in 1948. And Israel, it turns out, is pretty much genociding, is the only way you can put it. In fact, world courts have ruled this. Genociding the Palestinian people who lived there before the Zionist Jewish people. This is, you know, they're backed by all Jewish people. They try and speak for all the Jewish people, but they aren't. They're the Zionist Jewish people, heavily into, really fanatically into their religion and stuff, which has some pretty nasty prophecies. I won't get into this whole thing right now, but anyway, we stayed up all night and they were talking to me. Now, I'd grown up in a place where Israel was this wonderful country and they were really tough, you know, and we'd grown up on Exodus. You know, the movie Exodus, which glorified, you know, the Jewish people for taking back, you know, the Holy Land, you know, and stuff. Well, that's the center of the world's problems today, okay? Anyway, but this is my first introduction to this whole mess. This is all I'm going to say about it right now. But it's a nasty thing going on, and most Americans still do not know jack about what's really going on there. Well, I found out that night, and these people laid a bunch of stuff on me. The Six-Day War just happened, where Israel attacked all its neighbors and seized a bunch of land, and that had just happened, and there was this ongoing war now between the Israeli Zionists and the Palestinian people who'd been displaced and brutally terrorized by these people. And so these guys laid all this stuff on me, and, you know, proof of it and stuff. It was like real eye-opener, because I never got that side of the story in the United States, and still today you don't get that side of the story in the United States. And if you look into the matter, you can find out why. Anyway, that was a mind blower, okay. So I said goodbye to the students after, I think I stayed there a couple of days. And because they were learning English. They all spoke really good French, and they spoke, so a few of them spoke really good English too. And a lot of them had learned like rock and roll Beatles songs and stuff. They learned English listening to Beatles and Stones and stuff. So they spoke kind of a strange dialect. But they were really cool people, and very sincere and very friendly. No alcohol either, and no pot either, no cannabis either. You find that among like the more educated, they shun away from the cannabis. It's more like the lower classes and stuff, like you're kind of starting to see here in the States with tobacco. You know, it's like mostly poor people are smoking, and people that are more well off are shunning that. And even with cannabis here too in this day and age. Anyway, okay. So I took off, got on the road, got a couple little rides, but then I got like the greatest freaking ride ever, man. This is a dream ride. Okay, so I'm out there hitching away with my, and you know, I gotta say too, about the geography there, Northern Africa along the Mediterranean is just a Garden of Eden. It's just green and lush, and crops, agriculture, and wonderful vegetation, and wonderful buildings and little cities and towns and stuff. It's just an incredibly beautiful place. All along Morocco and Algeria and Tunisia. That's where I went. It was this beautiful, just lush green. And I always thought it was desert, you know, like growing up in the States, you know, Africa, Sahara Desert, you know. But I was really kind of blown away because it's like just gorgeous green along the Mediterranean. Then south of that, you've got the Atlas Mountains, and then south of that, you've got the Sahara Desert. But it's far away from the coast along the Mediterranean where I was traveling. Anyway, I got this incredible ride. This Volkswagen van I see, it's kind of brown Volkswagen van, you know, clicking along like Volkswagen vans do. And it's early 1970, and I'm up there hitching away, and this thing pulls over, and it's these two guys from San Francisco. And they're like two hippies from San Francisco, like, whoa, worshipful San Francisco, you know, the summer of love, you know, where all the bands, you know, the Dead and the Airplane, you know, and Quicksilver, you know, they all came from there, and San Francisco was the scene. I was from way north of there. We all envied the San Francisco people. Anyway, these guys had just come over. They just done Morocco. They bought this van. They had some money, and they had all this like new music, like Neil Young. You know, I'd never heard of Neil Young except in the Buffalo Springfield. I'd heard some of his songs, but I hadn't heard his solo thing, which was brand new. And so that was kind of a mind blow because he was so unique and his voice was so kind of whiny, you know, and stuff. But his songs were great, you know, and they really spoke to our generation. He was around the same age as us. Anyway, we cruised along, and they were going to freaking Greece. So, like, what a great ride. I'm in a Volkswagen van, North Africa. We go out Algeria, you know. We went to Algiers, and then we went to Constantine, this beautiful ancient city. You know, this big, huge, they had a big Acropolis there with these bridges across, city of bridges with these beautiful sculptures. And I remember all that, and we were just cruising along, listening to all the latest tunes. They had like the first like cassette deck or something in this Volkswagen. It was really, really cool. You know, we were listening to, you know, all the songs of Stones and Crosby, Stills and Nash and Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin and all this stuff. It was an awesome time. Anyway, we cruised on. We went into Tunisia. About all I remember there is we were heading for the ferry in Tunis. And on the way, we were going through a lot of kind of back roads and stuff. And I remember seeing the hugest wild boar I'd ever seen in my life. It came out of the bushes, ran alongside the Volkswagen van. I was in the back. And it was like freaking almost, it was like really freaking huge. I didn't know they got that big, you know. I thought the thing could tip the freaking van over. It was so big. And it was like, looked at us and had these freaking big tusks. I mean, this thing was like as big as a freaking cow, you know. It was like really a big boar, wild boar. And it ran along, and we freaked out. Anyway, we got to the boat in Tunis, and we cruised over to Palermo, Italy. Okay, so goodbye Africa, hello Europe. And we're in Sicilia, or Sicily, we call it over here. And it was weird because we cruised in there in the Volkswagen and there was no customs at all. They didn't even care. I guess the place is run by the freaking Sicilian mafia. So we looked okay. So no passport stamp or nothing. I was really disappointed. I wanted another stamp in the passport. Anyway, we cruised Italy. All I remember about Italy is espresso. They had these espresso shops where there are two doors. One is an indoor. You go in, and the guy's just sitting there making espressos and putting them on the, you know, the counter there. And you give him a lira, friggin' take an espresso, you hit it, and you're out the other door. You know, boom, fast espresso shot. I'll have a cup right here. To Italy. And all I remember about that is espresso, driving through the countryside, because we were heading for Greece. And I was like kind of dozing, I remember, and I hear this like, wow, wow, wow. I go, what the hell? And I look, and out the window, and there's this freaking Formula One race car, like cruises by, like up the road, and I look, and there's a freaking big Goodyear truck up there with, they're bouncing big, huge, fat tires out of the back, and I'm like, look around, and we're right in the middle of some Grand Prix race thing. And I remember hearing about it or reading about it in the International Herald Tribune, which is the great newspaper you get over there in Europe and elsewhere overseas, that's in English. And it's the International Herald Tribune, and it's where you get the news, what's going on back home, you know, in the States and other places. Anyway, I read that it's like Steve McQueen, you know, he was a big movie star back then, you know, was actually racing. He was a race car driver too. I don't think he ever did much, you know, but he was out there. He's famous for the scene in this movie Bullet in San Francisco where he drives this freaking rotted out Mustang, you know, through the streets of San Francisco. It's one of the greatest chase scenes ever made. Anyway, I guess he was there. I didn't see him, you know, but I just heard, oh, this is the big race, you know, there's a Formula One racers, man. Really cool. Anyway, kind of cruised through there and then got to Brindisi. That's the big port in the sort of heel of the boot of Italy, and it's the port. You go to Greece, and you go over to Patras in Greece. And that's where we went, and it was cool. I don't remember much of it. You know, it's 50 years ago. I just remember, you know, where we went there, and these guys were really nice guys, and one guy I can kind of still see him now. He kind of had the kind of light brown curly hair, kind of fro-like thing with a big mustache, you know, and really friendly guy. And then the other guy, I think, was more straight-haired, kind of quieter than the driver guy, you know. But anyway, they were really cool. I don't remember their names. It's probably in my address book. I could probably maybe figure it out, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, we went to Athens, and I wanted to go to the Acropolis. I'd heard about that. I think maybe in history or something. I never paid much attention to history till I actually went over there and started seeing, you know, what was going on. Then I really got into history. But I'd never been into it much in high school. Anyway, I knew the Acropolis, so we went up there and they dumped me off, and I had my pack, I had everything in it, and I thanked them kindly for that wonderful ride. That was like the awesomest hitching ride I ever got in my life, through 4 countries, you know, from Algeria all the way to Athens. Woohoo! Pretty cool. Anyway, here I am in Athens. I'm on the Acropolis. Now, the Acropolis means big rock, you know, and back in the day when the Greeks were like all fighting and killing each other, they had these little city-states. Each city, you know, fought with each other and all the time, and they wanted to have their city on a rock outcropping. Well, the Acropolis of Athens is one of the most famous ones in history because it was really a good one, a great big rock outcropping with almost straight down sides on like 3 sides of it. And a spring, there's a spring up there too. So this was their holy place, and when the Golden Age happened, this is where Pericles, you know, built like the freaking Parthenon, which is like the symbol of ancient Greece in the Golden Age. You know, it's the most perfect building, but then the Venetians and the Turks blew it up. But it's still there, you know, pretty much the outline of it. The marbles, the Elgin marbles they call them, the front, you know, sculpture of the building are in the British Museum. You can see them up there. That's because Elgin stole them. They call them the Elgin marbles. The Greeks still want it back. But anyway, this is where this place is, and it's like the big famous tourist attraction in Athens. And you've got the Acropolis there, and then around the Acropolis you got the Plaka district, which is all the little shops and the restaurants and really cool little touristy places. And actually there's really cool places. There's like little flea markets and stuff. You can pick up really interesting antiques and stuff. It's quite a cool spot. Anyway, I was up there. Now you can't do this now, I don't think. I'm sure you can. But I went down, there was a little wooded area that was, like trees and stuff, and kind of out of the way between the Acropolis area, where the Parthenon is, and down to the Agora, which is the ancient Greek marketplace. The Agora is the market. That's where Socrates used to hang out and yak and stuff. And there's like this little kind of wooded area. There's another place right by it, Mars Rock, which kind of started where the wooded stuff was and where the last kind of road was. But if you cruise down in there, there are places, I just set up camp. I just laid my sleeping bag out and hid my pack in some bushes, and that's where I was staying, free, right on the Acropolis. And so I was staying there a couple nights. I actually got really in trouble one day. I was up. Then you could just walk in there. Now you can't do that. And you can't even get inside the Parthenon. Now they got a big fence around it. But then you could just walk in it. In fact, I was like inside the Parthenon, and I saw where. I guess what had happened is the Parthenon was like this treasure of Golden Age Greece from 400. BC and stuff, 400 or 500 BC, and it was this perfect building, and it had been perfect until I think it was around the 1700s, somewhere in there. I can find out exactly, but what happened was the Venetians were fighting the Turks for Athens. They were always these fighting back and forth for influence, and the Turks were holding out at Athens, and they kept, I guess they used the Parthenon for their ammo dump, because they figured it was a safe place to put all their ammo, because the Venetians would never, blow up the most priceless building in the heritage of the Western civilization, But the Venetians did, and they lobbed a shell in there and blew the whole thing up. Okay, so the kind of the fronts there, most of the columns in the back, and the big frieze areas, and the columns, and the kind of outside rim of it's still there. But inside, there used to be kind of a building, and that's just blown to hell. And anyway, the one part of it is like a stairway, and I was in pretty good shape and young, and spry, and it was like a little stairway that kind of went right up to the top part of the Parthenon. So I'm like, oh, cool, nobody's watching. So I jump up on the thing, and I crawl up on the next one, and next one, pretty soon I'm like about 20 feet up, and I'm looking around, I can see everybody, around, nobody sees me, so I'm like, oh. So I crawl up, boom, all of a sudden I'm right up in the front of it, where I could see the inside of it, and I could see old initials that the workmen had carved into it up there and stuff, and I'm like, wow, this is cool, but then I look down and I see, there's some guy looking at me, and he sees me, and he's got a uniform on, and he's a cop, and he's like, hey, talking to you, I'm like, holy shit, I'm busted. So I run down as fast as I can, jumping down the big stairway thing, and he's running, I see him running across at me. Now, he was about maybe 150 feet away, 200 feet away, and he's running toward me, and it looks like he's going for his gun. I'm like, holy shit, I better get out of here. So I got down, so it was about probably a little under 10 feet away from the other side, and I just vaulted right over the side. And so he couldn't see me when I went down the other side of the wall. He was coming this way, and hit the ground running, man. And I was freaking just booking it, down the front toward Mars Rock and the little forested area where the Agora was behind. And I just hauled ass, and I heard this guy yelling at me and shit. And I turned around, he had his freaking gun out, and he was talking all stuff, Boy, I wasn't stopping. I had a good lead on him, and I just hauled ass over, disappeared down in the woods, and hid out down there for the rest of the day. Kind of slipped out down in the Agora, got my stuff, packed my stuff up, got out of there. So I decided that I was going to go to a place that was really super hip, man. I mean, totally super freaking hip, that I read about in Life magazine when I was back in the States before I split. And this was a place like called Matala, the Caves of Matala. It had been in like Life magazine, where place where draft dodgers hang out. There's these caves there, and people are living in them. You know, and I'm like, yeah, well, I guess I'm technically a draft dodger. You know, might as well do this. You know, get out there. So I went down to Piraeus, which is right next to Athens. It's the port of Athens, the ancient port of Athens. You know. And got a boat, and you could get a really super deal if you just did deck, because it was like an overnight trip out to Crete. It was quite a ways away, but you could just get a deck pass and just crash out on a bench on the deck. It was like pretty nice and warm there. It was late spring, you know, and really nice, you know, t-shirt kind of weather. Anyway, I got the boat and headed out to Crete, and then I took a little bus down to Matala. Matala. Oh man, I was there. It was so cool. It was this little cove in the southern part of Crete, which housed the ancient Minoan civilization. The Minoans are the most cool of all the ancient people. If I could go back in time, I would go back and be a Minoan. They're peaceful, you know, like men and women wore makeup and pretty, you know, jewelry and stuff. They were pretty much, the sexes were equal. Partnership society, not a matriarchy, not a patriarchy, a partnership society. They traded. The Egyptians call them the great ones who come in peace from Kiftu, you know. They didn't wear much. The women all went topless all the time. These, you know, they worshipped goddesses and animals and stuff, and there's a few gods too, but Mother Earth, that's where it comes from. I just love the Minoans, and anyway, I didn't know all this stuff at the time when I was there, but I was getting the vibe. Anyway, it went south. I was just going down to the caves, you know, and the caves were freaking awesome, and you could live in them. There were a bunch of freaking hippies all living in the freaking caves of Matala. Sure enough, there it was, a little town. They had little seaside cafes and stuff, and right across the beach where the waves are coming in, we could like body surf in there and stuff, were these caves, and there were these layers of them. Like the water, like you know, was, well, the water was receding, but what was actually happening was Crete was lifting up, okay, and so there are these like caves, and the higher you went, the older they were, because they had lifted up, you know, and so way up at the top, they were. It was described, you know, and I'm not really sure about this, but it was a leper colony. And then what had happened is, it was like an ancient leper colony back, you know, like pre-biblical probably or something, you know. And that's what the caves had first been used for. And then some of them, people were digging skulls and stuff out, and it was a Roman burial ground where the Romans had some battles out there. They buried a bunch of their soldiers in these caves, in the old leper caves or something, and sealed them up. But at the bottom, though, were the Christians, and it had been like a monastery, and these monks had like carved these freaking awesome caves out. They're still there, but you have to pay money to go in them now. But then it was like hippies, and one was the big cave. The coolest part was the big cave, and I have such luck sometimes, especially when I'm traveling. I don't know what that is, but I got a berth in the big cave. Now the big cave was really cool. It was probably about like 20 by 20 feet. It had a sunken living room, you know. So at night, everybody would sit around on the edge of the sunken living room with bongos and wine and whatever, you know, and pass it around. There'd be a big hippie party in there every night. I mean, people would be like bawling on the floor and stuff. That's an old term. You can look that up in hippie slang, what that means. But anyway, I was nuts. Anyway, the monks had cut this out, you know, with the sunken living room, and then like the walkway around it was about 4 feet wide. And then in the back, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. There are these carved out areas. There were these big arches that went in about 3.5 feet, like a big arch carved right out of the rock, just big enough to put your sleeping bag down. And in the back of that, a little tiny arched, kind of like little shelf place carved into the stone there. You could put your candle and your book, or whatever, your glasses, whatever, contact lenses then. Oh, but this is a place I lost one of my contact lenses in the surf. And somebody gave me a pair of glasses that actually fit. They're really weird looking. I think they're girls' glasses. They're sort of oval shaped, but they could pass for guys' glasses these days. But so I remember I had those until I lost them and started going with one contact lens. But I didn't care. I was just a free spirit on the loose. Okay, so Matala, I got a berth in the big cave. Somebody was just moving out when I came in. They said, "Oh, you can have that one." So I had the primo room free in the big cave in Matala in May of 1970. And there are a ton of hippies there, and I was hanging out with some people from Finland that I really liked. Also, just then, like something like 8 kilos of hash had just come in. Some people, heroes, had brought in the hash. People don't really smoke so much weed over there; it's all hash, and they grumble it up with tobacco and smoke it in joints or in pipes. That's how they do it everywhere else, that I went. Europe, all the way out to Asia. A little tobacco in there. Anyway, all this hash had just come in, so everybody was stoned pretty good. A bunch of Lebanese, really good stuff, some Afghani, I guess, had come in. And also, I just missed I was the gal I was in love with. Joni Mitchell had just left there like a couple days before I got there. And like that really disappointed me because I was in love with Joni Mitchell. I had been ever since I heard Judy Collins sing Joni Mitchell's song, Both Sides Now. I remember I really liked that song. I liked the words in it, and I looked at the artist that wrote it, and it was Joni Mitchell. I go, who the heck's that? But then a few weeks later, I remember I went to the local store in my hometown and was looking through the albums. I saw, Song to a Seagull, Joni Mitchell. That's the one that wrote Both Sides Now. So I looked at Both Sides Now. It wasn't on the album, but I bought the album anyway and was introduced to Joni Mitchell's first album. And boy, I tell you, she was, to me, the greatest singer-songwriter gal the world had ever seen. And I missed her by like a few days. Her boyfriend that she wrote a song about, she wrote a song called Carrie, Get Out Your Cane. It's all about Matala, and she immortalized this place that I went to like right after she was there. Carrie was still there. There's this Greek guy that was kind of lame, and he'd shacked up with Joni, and I was like, jealous, man. This guy had really made it big time. And anyway, so the stuff was going on there. The Greek cops were there. This is the time of the colonels, the famous dictatorship. It was actually a military junta, which is like a military dictatorship in Greece. And they'd taken over in 67, and they lasted until 73, I think. And they were these colonels that just took over the government. The left-wingers were all kind of coming apart at the seams, and so these guys just organized the army, arrested everybody, shut the thing down, and took over. And actually, it was economically, it was the best time ever for Greece. Their economic, without all the bullshit politics, it was just run by an authoritarian group who kind of knew what they were doing. Everybody prospered during those times, so it just goes to show you, democracy might not be the answer. Woo! Anathema. Anyway, I was out in Matala, and it was really cool, and I was introduced to ouzo out there, and this is just like Greek liqueur, and we'd get it in these little bottles, and you put it in a glass, and then you put a little water in it, and it turns this milky, whitish kind of translucent color, and you drink it. It tastes like licorice, and I think it's maybe related to anyway. So I had a really good time there. And I remember too, I was climbing on some of the cliffs up there. I was traveling around. You go out in the kind of wildernessy kind of areas, and then find a little like church with these beautiful icons in it. Nobody's around, but it's a little Greek Orthodox church, up on a mountaintop or something. And all these treasures in it, just sitting there. Just going, wow, this is really cool. I remember crawling around on these ledges and stuff. I was doing some like pretty technical rock climbing without any technical gear, but crawling up these straight faces and stuff, looking down at the rocks. I was pretty crazy back then. I was into taking chances, but I was a pretty lucky person. And I remember seeing these fossils too, ancient fossils in the cliff sides of these kind of huge, like sea anemone type things. Anyway, it was a wonderful experience out on Matala, living in the caves. Oh, and there's this really cool hippie guy there. He's this little short guy from like Chicago or something called Yogi Joe. And Yogi Joe used to have like nude yoga with Yogi Joe at the Roman baths. And everybody get up in the morning and head around kind of like these kind of like shoreline kind of rock area out on the point, away from the village, from the caves. You go around this point and you find this place. There's these old, what's left of some Roman baths, and it's pretty much not much left of them. All the building materials gone, but it's just these depressions and stuff that are left there. Anyway, it's a pretty flat area, and everybody gets naked, and Yogi Joe's there, and man, that guy, he's scoring stuff. He ends up like super long hair with a super long beard. And he was a yogi guy, he'd been a yogi guy in the States, I guess, and he was over there doing yoga stuff. I saw him again, too. I remember out in Afghanistan, he had a Land Rover out there, but he had a gig going, and he had all the women, man, these guys. Nude yoga, man. Hippie days, those crazy, crazy days. Anyway, so I stayed there a while and then booked out of there back to Athens. And I was on my way to India. This is just sort of a side thing, and I remember I read about the hippie caves in Matala in Life magazine, I think about a year before that or so, and it was really fun to kind of check out the scene there and find out. It was like Joni Mitchell was there. I guess Bob Dylan went there and stuff. I returned again when I came back through a year later, and I'll tell you about that when we get to it, but things were a lot different there then. Anyway, I got back to Athens on the boat, and I was heading out. I had to go to Istanbul. And I've been talking to people, all the hippies on the Hippy Trail, they're all talking it up, and we got places we meet, and little plazas and stuff. And I was learning the ropes, man. It was really a cool scene. I was starting to get it down, And I went to the train station, I got a train ticket, and I headed up to Istanbul. And that's where I learned to play the harp. Okay, so we're coming to the end of this story from Algeria, Tunisia, Italy, and Greece. I'm going to Istanbul, and that's going to be the next one. It's Istanbul to Afghanistan. So I got on the train and headed to Istanbul, and on the way, I was hanging out, third class, hanging out there, no hippies or anyone on the train, so I'm kind of sitting by myself. And I decide, well, I'm gotta go hit the facilities, and where is it? Well, it's way at the back of the train, okay? Well, I'm not gonna leave my pack, I take my pack with me everywhere I go. I never leave it unattended over there. And I never lost it either. But anyway, I went to the back of the bus, and there's kind of a little compartment, about as big as kind of this little area here, and there's a water closet right there, so I went in there, and it was like a 270-degree, a three-sided view of the back of the train. It was all window glass, there's another car behind me. Well, so I opened the water closet door, and I saw, oh man, I can't get my pack in there, and work in there. So unless you can lock the door. So I locked the door and put my pack outside the door and went in there. So I'm doing my business in there, and the train, all of a sudden, the train stops, you know. So I'm like, the train stopped. Then I hear this click, you know, big noises, clanking and stuff, you know. And then it stops. We take off again. Well, I'm finally finished up, you know, and I get out, you know, and I'm the last car. This 270-degree view I've got out the back is all the Greek countryside, you know, and I'm at the back of the freaking train. Lucky I didn't go to the next car down, you know, because I was hidden in the water closet there. But anyway, so I thought, well, this is pretty cool. I got the door locked, the little curtain on it. I closed the curtain, and I just hung out there. You know, I could see every place we've been as we cruised down the tracks, you know, and you could see like old bombed out places from World War II and stuff, you know, and beautiful farms and vineyards and orchards and all this. It was just beautiful. The mountains, you know, we're going through like Macedonia, you know, where Alexander the Great had grown up and stuff. I'm like, oh wow, cool. And so I was looking around my pack, and I found this harmonica that my friend Mike had given me before I left to go over there. He went, here's a musical guy. He played guitar and stuff, and I was always into music. So he gives me this harp. It's a C harp, okay. So I'm like, wow, sitting there on this train. The train's going chicka 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 chicka. So I'm like, wow, wow, you know. So I start playing this harp, and I've got this perfect rhythm track going on with the train. So I sat there and started blowing harp till I could do anything I wanted with it. Must have played for 2 hours straight while I watched the Greek countryside go by. That was a wonderful experience. I thank Mike for that one. But anyway, we're pulling into Istanbul, and this is where Europe meets Asia. And so I'm going to sign off for now, and this was chapter 4. Chapter 5 coming up on my book called One Way Ticket. It's my online book about my adventures from January 1970 until June 1972. 2.5 years hitching around the world. So that's it. We'll see you later. Wow.